Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming. The first session we're doing today, very excited about this. Might be a little contentious, might not, who knows. The session is called Why Megatrends Trump Politics. But I want to introduce the panelists today, a very good friend of mine. First of all, Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield from Transport Evolved. Come up, Nikki. And you sit there. Next is an amazing man, Mr. Roger Atkins from EV Outlook. Roger knows a lot. Thank you very much. And finally, Elisa Murphy from Life Size Media. Welcome, Elisa. We are in a transition, as is very obvious from being here today. We're in a transition from old fossil-based energy systems and style
Did you notice that? He's just looked at me when he said old fossil. That wasn't very nice, was it, Robert?
Well, never mind. We're both old fossils, it's fine. But yeah, so we're in that transition, and yet there is, as we know, some resistance in certain quarters. I think, interestingly, less so in this country with our current administration, which, I don't agree with everything they're doing, but they're actually committed more than one would expect to electric vehicles, to offshore wind, not solar. But they're making some sounds that are encouraging.
Yes.
But Nikki, just to remind everybody who doesn't know, Nikki lives in the United States.
It wasn't my fault. I couldn't vote.
No, she couldn't vote.
But we've got an eco-terrorist in charge. Honestly, and I can say this because I'm among friends, I hope. If I said this in America, I might end up not being around for very long. But it feels like we have an eco-terrorist in the White House. Also in the EPA, Scott Pruitt, who has been dismantling the EPA piece by piece.
I think it's important to explain what the EPA is because I'm very aware. The Environmental Protection Agency is really the American government body that brought in the very concept of low-emission vehicles, of electric vehicles, of renewable energy, of cleaning up rivers, of,
And for many years, they were working alongside the California Air Resource Board, which I know a lot of you will have heard of, and other state bodies, other state organizations. They've been working with industry around the world, and around the US. And the EPA is essentially focuses on clean air, clean water, making sure that resources are properly managed, making sure that there's no pollution from industrial efforts. And for those who don't know, the current head of the EPA has ties to big oil.
Yeah.
And he was actually in the process of suing the EPA when he became the head of the EPA.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I've just been to Calgary in Canada, which... You've heard of the Calgary Stampede. Well, a lot of what you're here for and what you're about is this stampede towards electric vehicles, which is scaring the shit out of people in big oil. And Calgary is the head of, oil and gas in Canada.
The oil sands and
exactly,
Alberta's
exactly.
big oil.
It was an event called Energy Disruptors. And someone said to me, he pointed at me and he said, well, your lot have taken coal out of the equation, haven't you? So I sort of looked around thinking, what did you mean, my lot? And then he said, you're coming for gas next, aren't you? I said, well, it's not like that. We're not a gang. We're not a bunch of kind of terrorists.
Oh, I'm a gang. Bring it.
Okay, we are a gang. Unofficially, officially we're not a gang. Unofficially, we are.
We need a gang sign, though.
Yeah.
So if anyone thinks of one, let me know.
Actually, for £1,000, who comes up with the best gang sign?
The best
could do that.
The EV gang sign.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm saying is people in that industry understand what's happening. They are well aware of this transition. And all they're trying to work out, and I'm being kind now for a minute, is how do you make the transition in terms of keeping people's jobs? How do you not dismantle the local industry, the commercial activity? And how do you actually switch this stuff?
One of my dearest friends works for a company in downtown Portland. I'm not going to say the name of the company because I don't want to get him into trouble. He works for a company that makes oil pumps. These massive, he's given me a tour of his facilities, and massive industrial machines that make these massive pumps that have traditionally been used to pump oil out of the ground, that have been used to pump oil along pipelines. And he said to me about 2 years ago, he said, we're friends, but we should be enemies because you're trying to kill my job. And I said, no, it will change. You will change. Your company will progress. And about 6 months ago, he sent me a message. He said, you were right. My company is starting to switch from producing oil pumps to producing water pumps. And that's opened up the market because we're now selling water pumps to parts of the world that we would never, ever have sold parts to previously.
Yeah.
If Henry Ford and his workers had faced the same kind of
they did. Yeah,
the same
without
kind
question.
of political uproar in certain countries because they were going to get rid of the horse and move to
What
a
about
car.
what about all those stable workers and saddle makers and horse feed people? There was hundreds of thousands of them.
If it's in the storytelling, I mean, how good are we at the storytelling? Is that are we good at it? Is it working?
I don't think we've been nearly good enough at it, actually. It wouldn't surprise you that I would think that, but I think you touched on it there. That the key with clean technologies, which is all the work we do, is that at its core, there's a tech that can just do stuff better, more efficiently, more intelligently, make people more money, be more productive, be just plain sexier, and that's where we really need to focus. It's just better tech. That's all it's about. It's not really about being green or being sustainable. That's a really pleasant byproduct. If we want technologies to be successful, they've got to be better than the incumbent technologies. And that's where the storytelling comes in. Remember how quickly those transitions happen. So it's not, the graph doesn't look like this smooth curve like this. It's going to look slow, 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 and everyone's going to wonder why nothing's happened, and everyone's going to say no one's interested in electric vehicles, it's not going to work, and then it just suddenly spikes. That's, all of those, the mobile phone, all of those technologies, that's what we see. It's it's slow until, once the floodgates open, it's very, very quick change.
But I mean, I think really what this topic is trying to understand, and I think I know the answer, but it is, is it possible for someone in a position as powerful as President Trump to stop this transition happening in a way?
No.
It feels like it really isn't. He's powerless in that sense.
I don't think it is, because I think you just mentioned the mobile phone. Has anyone got a mobile phone in the audience? Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that device, that tool, it's all sorts of things. It's good and bad stuff. That's the key to all of this stuff. It's nothing to do with any politician that's ever been or will be, because that tool connects up everything. And in terms of megatrends, and I know when we had a chat about stuff, I was banging on about robot cars and no one would drive anymore, and it sounds horrible. And to some extent it does, but partly that's a generational thing.
Yeah.
For younger people, if you can't afford to buy a car, if having a car parked up is a pain in the arse, if all the other things are difficult, you just want to go from A to B, owning a car isn't a badge. That is what will happen, because it will be driven by economics, as you were saying earlier, Nick.
Yeah.
It's about what's better, not what a bunch of crazy people in California want us to do. It's what will work better and sustain the planet, because this whole journey of the mobile phone and connectivity is taking everything that's been a bit useless and not joined up and not particularly well utilized and maximizing the hell out of it all.
Just to answer that question about can someone like Trump stop this, I'm going to lose my mind for just a second and say something positive about Trump, which I know. You wanted controversial. Okay. Here's the real controversy.
Sure.
I think actually we can't. I think Trump is doing something weirdly positive in that he's actually galvanizing people.
Yeah.
To this cause, to this movement, to this
because
gang.
It's so
because
crazy.
When you see someone so ignorant and so irresponsible who's just willing to play games with this, it really unites people, and it's bringing people together, I think, in these industries and people of just common sense who care about the future of the planet in a way that we have so much divide in this sector. But when you see someone like Trump who's just willing to play with our futures, I think it really pulls people together, and I think it's an unintended, potentially positive consequence.
Absolutely, because it was all the mayors of all the cities. I mean, you'll know more about this.
Exactly.
When he pulled out of the Paris Agreement, how many? It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because if you ever happen to go to Portland, there is a fantastic conference that happens there every year. It used to be called the EV Roadmap. It's now called the roadmap because they now encompass car sharing, autonomous vehicles, bicycle sharing, and things other than plug-in cars. And I was at that, and Governor Kate Brown, who's currently the Oregon governor, came on stage and basically said, sorry, Mr. Trump, we're still going to do this. Bye-bye.
When we talk about megatrends and big things happening, there is more happening in China, partly because the government can have a definition, have a plan, and stick to it. You know, China is driving all this stuff, whether we like it or not.
And it's driven by money, isn't it? It's driven by the businesses going, oh, look, we can make money. And there's lots going on in China that is absolutely abhorrent. But the transition is happening because people can make money from it.
What I think is the funniest thing in China is the biggest company for ride sharing, a huge company, 550 million people are ride sharing. They called the company Didi. That's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, Didi is supposed to be huge, isn't it? I mean, but it's small.
It's supposed to be small, yeah.
I mean, you know, they called it gargantuan. I mean, I know it's a bigger name, wouldn't fit on the side of the cars, but you know, Didi is the last thing it is.
Just wanted to pick up on your point about people engaging with politics, and I think that's absolutely right, but it's not just about voting, which we should all do, but I think there's a really great example that we have here in the UK, which is the attention on plastics pollution. Yeah. So if you look at that and even just in the last 6 months, that's a really great example of how, you know, we had Blue Planet, we had Sky's Ocean Rescue Campaign, and people got rightly very upset about how much plastic pollution there is in the oceans. And in an incredibly short amount of time, that is influencing government policy.
And big corporations,
they are very, very actively making change
what's
around
really
this.
fascinating about that, about 8 or 9 years ago, I was on a panel with an amazing-looking hippie dude with a man bun. I didn't know who he was. He was David. And he'd sailed across the Pacific on a raft made of plastic water containers that he'd strapped together, and he'd done it. But when he was halfway across, the reason he did it was because in the middle of the Pacific was this island the size of Norway, I think at the time, that was just plastic waste floating around.
Still there. I think it's still there.
It's still there. But what is amazing is he did that
America
8-9 years ago and tried to get people to act on it. And not, you know, and now it's very interesting how that gradually seeps in. So then a producer at the BBC read his blog, and then someone said, we've got to film this, and then someone said, let's put it in Blue Planet, and then it kind of finally came out. But it's not a new problem.
No,
it's a very old
but I
problem.
think the positive thing is just that government does care about what people care about, and so I guess the point is care harder and care louder and care more actively
and be more actively involved.
Can I ask for a show of hands, who would, if economically it was cheaper by quite a lot of money, would be happy not owning a car and just with your phone getting one to just pitch up, whatever? Who would be happy for that to happen?
But I'd want a car in the garage for the weekend.
And that's the thing, you know, I am a selfish old bastard. I have lived through a generation and the people before me where owning a car shows what I'm like, I think, to other people. But it's parked on my drive for an hour on end, parked at work, but I don't give a flying what's it. But actually the unintended consequence of that is a huge waste of resource. There wasn't an alternative before. We couldn't do anything about that. But now that we can, and now that we can do that thing that I think is the most important thing in all of this stuff in terms of megatrends, which is share stuff.
Yeah.
Our generation, I'm not trying to berate us all and everybody else here, we are a greedy, selfish generation that have taken so much of the... we didn't mean to do it.
No, we didn't mean to
do it on purpose.
We wanted to be nice.
Yeah, we really did. But with the way technology can liberate those assets, that stuff, we can still enjoy doing things. I mean, we're at Silverstone racetrack.
Yeah.
I personally believe in the future, when it's all boring robot cars, that nothing happens except a squeaky voice and it looks like a bubble car. You will come to places like Silverstone and drive noisy, smelly, combustion engine race cars and have a bloody great time. Yeah. I'd love it. It's not kill the car, it's just share stuff better and make the planet work.
You know what?
I just want to say quickly one thing. The fact that Roger said, I don't give a flying what's it, is a massive step forward for him. That was a really, really important...
Yes.
I was very grateful for that. I just want to quickly ask Elisa, because you're in contact with lots and lots of different clean tech companies, would you say generally they are optimistic and hopeful about their their future performance, or are they all worried and depressed and going bankrupt?
And I think they're very optimistic.
Right.
I think that the companies that are really going to be successful, of course, need and would like government support to get there quicker, and we don't have the luxury of time, but they'll get there. They'll get there anyway. They're not going to let those obstacles stand in their way, because like I said before, the technology is just better. It's just common sense.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, and I think that the governments that are standing in the way are just on the wrong side of history.
Yes. And I mean, can you pick one or two technologies that, from your experience, are the ones that you think are the most likely to get mass adoption fastest, other than electric vehicles? I mean, outside.
Yeah, well, just to add, so electric vehicles, but in the broadest sense. So we work with a lot of electric companies that are electrifying ferries and forklift trucks and buses. So it's not just consumer vehicles, and there's a huge amount of transport that all is getting electrified very quickly. We've got electric buses deploying at a very fast rate, particularly in China.
Yeah.
We just this week launched the world's first liquid air energy storage plant. Probably not a tech that you spend a lot of time thinking about, but it's long duration energy storage,
Brilliant
which is going to be
idea,
absolutely crucial for balancing the grid as we get renewables coming on. And this is, when I started working in 2010, everyone was talking about energy storage like this futuristic thing that was going to happen one day, and it's here and it's now, and it's happening. It's already out there. It's already getting deployed.
Right.
Would you say that the transition to renewable fuels and alternative vehicles is a little bit like the transition to computers in the 1980s? You're seeing businesses jump on board first, and then it trickles down into consumers. Because, I mean, if you think about the cost savings for fleets, you mentioned buses in China, the reason why they're switching over, aside from the air quality problems, is TCO, total cost of ownership, and the amount of savings that can be made. I mean,
and then this is why I mentioned this curve, because as you say, in the business and commercial world, it's so close. There are so many manufacturers that are so this far away from placing major orders for entire fleets of buses, of trucks. It's going to happen really quickly.
Happen very quickly.
I mean, I want them to happen. It should happen faster, and they should stop holding their current fossil position.
Yeah.
But when it happens, it will come quickly.
Yeah, we unfortunately have run out of time. Can we thank the amazing panel? What an incredible thing, Nikki, Roger, Elisa. Thank you so much. You've been brilliant.